It's catching the neurotransmitters, baby. And when it does that, these receptors with the neurotransmitters, then they cause an electrical signal, an electrical impulse to go into the next cell. So these chemical neurotransmitters, these guys that are chemicals, cause an electrical impulse to be transferred to the next cell. And then electrical impulse. Let me erase that and make that nicer for you guys. So they cause these neurotransmitters, these guys, okay, cause an electrical impulse to start in the next cell, to start in the adjacent cell. Okay, so that's super cool. But in order to get these electrical impulses, in order to get from here all the way to here, well, they have to bind to the neuron, to the receptor, sorry. In order for them to get there, they have to cross this kind of tiny little gap that we have here. You guys see this gap? Maybe if I color it, what do you think? Pink? A little pink? So you see this space in here? All of this space? This is all space. They're not actually touching each other. Yeah, it's just space. So they've got to get from this side of the space to that side of the space. So they've got to move across that space. That space has a very special name. Okay, the synaptic gap. So this space right in here that we see, all of this space right in here, all of that empty space is the synaptic gap. And what happens is these neurotransmitters have to go from this side, from all of in here. Yep. Ooh, looky here. Extra ones there. So they have to jump across this gap. They got to go over here. They got to make it into one of these receptors. So they got to go from here to there. Now, interesting stuff that you totally don't need to know, but there ends up being a ton of them around here, like all on the floor and stuff, between the two, between the neuron on this side and then the other cell on the other side, whether that's a neuron or a muscle cell or some sort of an organ like a gland. There's a whole bunch of mess in here because it doesn't all make it to the receptor. That's kind of interesting because if you've ever heard of something called ADHD, one of the problems is that there's so much of these synaptic neurotransmitters in here that they don't get cleared out fast enough. And so these receptors, they can't transmit to the receptors because there's too much stuff in the way. So that's one thing that happens. Sometimes in ADHD, because there are different types, sometimes these neurotransmitters here, these little guys, don't move fast enough. Even though they get that electrical impulse to go, 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 they're like, yeah, okay, I'll make it over there. I'm coming in my own sweet time. So sometimes they just don't move fast enough. And there are lots of very interesting research going on right now about, I'm going to erase a bunch of this stuff so we don't, so I can show you a bit more. But there's an awful lot of research right now going on with regards to these synaptic clefts and how having problems at the synaptic cleft can be fixed. Like what can they do to help? And what are the different problems that are there? And sometimes it's just that there's just too much gunk in the way. And they literally call the proteins that come in, the enzymes that come in to clean out the gunk, they have a special name called a sweeper protein. And sometimes you're late on sweeper proteins and you don't have them, and so they just don't sweep up the mess. So anyway, okay, so now my drawing seems to all be off. I don't know how I did that. I moved one part of the drawing and not the other. That is very interesting. Okay, so there's another thing that we haven't actually talked about. So I didn't color the axon on this one, so why don't I do that too? You guys probably did while I was chit-chatting with you. So here's my axon here, right? Oh, and it's green. I don't want green. We wanted blue. So here's my axon here in blue. Yep.
Stop jumping on me.
And here's my axon here. And look, I'm going to get right up close and personal right here. Here is my axon tip. You see this? This is the tip of the axon on this side. And it's making a synapse, right? So a synapse is where you have the joining of an axon tip to either another dendrite or a cell. So this junction right here is a synapse. Oh, I misspelled that. Hang on. So this right here, where this axon tip meets this nerve cell, right here, both of them, that junction there is a synapse. And inside that synapse is a synaptic cleft or a synaptic gap. So a synaptic gap is between the axon tip from one cell. So the one cell is going to be a neuron, right? From one neuron. And the adjoining cell. And that adjoining cell can be a neuron. It can be a muscle cell. Or it can be some sort of a gland. Okay. So now the last bit that I want to talk about, which is also quite interesting, are the these little guys here. What is this? And I'm coloring it yellow on purpose because kind of looks like rolled butter. And rolled butter is kind of nothing more fancy schmancy than another way of saying fat, right? And that's exactly what these are. These are layers of fat wrapped around your axon. And they have a very special name, and that special name is myelin. And they're produced, this myelin is produced by a very special cell called a Schwann cell. So let's label these myelin, and you have some over here, and you can color them. I like yellow only because yellow is the color that we associate with fat. Yep. So, but this kind of fat, guys, is a very good fat. This is a brilliant fat. In fact, do you know that 60% of your brain mass is made up of fat? We need this fat because guess what this fat does? It insulates this axon. So why is that a big deal to us? Why do we care if it's insulated? Does it really matter, right? It's just taking up space. Well, it does really matter because by insulating it, so let's put this in. Sorry, I lost my color there. So by insulating it, so let me label it myelin. So I forgot about that here. Let me put it here, and this is also part of it here. It's all connected. Yep. So this is myelin. So let me write that here. Ah! Why did it do that? Oh, okay. So this is myelin. So this is called a myelin sheet, a sheath, not a sheet. Sorry, guys. So this is a myelin sheath. And basically, myelin insulates the nerve cell axon. And what does that do for us? Well, by insulating it, it's keeping that electrical signal on the axon. So the electrical signal doesn't escape from the axon, which is also really, really good. But it kind of does it in a very interesting way, and I'm going to show you in just a second. In fact, I have a great video clip to show you about that. So it insulates it, so it's keeping that electricity going down the right pathway. It doesn't let it come off and go talk to somebody else. It keeps it in this blue pathway here on the axon. So it keeps it in the straight and narrow, which is very important. Yeah, so it keeps it there. And also what it does is that it increases the speed of the impulse. By that, what I mean is that the electrical signal goes faster. So the more myelin sheet you have, the faster the impulse goes, the faster the electrical signal goes. So the myelin, so it insulates it, yep, and it also increases the speed of the electrical impulse. Traveling on the axon. Traveling down the axon, because it only goes one direction, right? Okay, so let's have a look here what we got. All right, so we have labeled, let's just make sure we've labeled everything. So we've labeled our dendrites, our tree branches. Yep, the dendrites receive electrical stimuli. That electrical stimuli goes one direction. It goes to the cell body. The cell body then transfers that stimuli or transmits that stimuli, passes it on to the axon, where the axon, I'm missing a little A there, guys. Sorry about that. The electrical stimuli reaches the axon and it travels down the axon to the axon tip. When that electrical stimuli reaches the axon tip, it triggers the neurotransmitters to be released into the synaptic gap. Those neurotransmitters are chemicals. Those chemicals then cause an electrical response in the following cell, in the cell adjacent to it on the other side of the gap. The myelin sheets here help to make sure that electrical impulse stays where it's supposed to be, and it doesn't go in other directions, so it's not going anywhere except down the axon in one direction. It only goes in one direction. Yeah. And in addition to that, these myelin sheaths help that electrical impulse go super fast. And the way it helps the electrical impulse go super fast, I'm just going to show you. You don't need to really understand this. It's kind of complicated, but honestly, the electrical impulse, let's say this is my impulse, when it gets to here, the beginning of this myelin sheath right here, it jumps over it and goes there, and jumps over it and goes there, and jumps over it and goes there. It's kind of like it gets to skip lines. Yeah? It's kind of like you get to cut in line at the cafeteria, right? So it's literally jumping over these, and it jumps super fast. Then it goes into the tip, and it stimulates the secretion of the neurotransmitters. It stimulates the neurotransmitters to be released, where there are receptors on the other side waiting for those neurotransmitters. They're like, yay, yay, gimme, 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 gimme. And once that neurotransmitter hits that receptor then transmits an electrical stimulus in the next cell. And then the electrical impulse follows through to the next cell, whatever that next cell may be. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your typical neuron. Impressive, right? Like totally impressive. They're amazing. And that's the end of this video. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you in a little bit.